Well, today, you and I continue our Let's Talk About post-Easter sermon series. Each week from now until Pentecost, the Sunday sermon will be reflecting on a difficult or unsettling word, concept, struggle, question of faith. Last week, Catherine started off things very well with a fine sermon about doubt. Well, this morning, the subject is Satan. The devil, Beelzebub, the adversary, the father of lies, Belial, the tempter, or whatever you want to call the one who tempted Jesus in the wilderness at the very beginning of his ministry. You've heard the story from the New Testament this morning. Jesus is gloriously baptized. The Spirit of God descends on him like a dove, and a voice from heaven proclaims, "This is my Son, my beloved, in whom I am well pleased." And now, a heart's beat later, while the clothes of Jesus are still trying to dry off, Jesus is thrown from this high point of life to face the devil in the wilderness. And this juxtaposition, I think, tells us something important about the devil. Isn't it your experience too that just when things seem to be going along most wonderfully and you feel as if you finally made it to the peak of human existence, it's just then that you're most vulnerable. It's then that we, like Jesus, can be tempted to betray our core identity. You and I are tempted to forget that we are created to be nothing less than, but also nothing more than human. And to be human is to have limits. If Satan was after Jesus Christ in this regard, you and I can be certain that the devil will be after us too. Well, there's no way to live a life in this world and not be subject to temptation, to be less or to be more than God created you to be. And in the temptation is where you and I encounter the devil. Whether you believe there was a literal wilderness, whether you believe in a literal devil, or whether you believe that the whole struggle took place within the mind and soul of Jesus, you and I simply can't deny the reality of the struggle. As preacher Fred Craddock puts it, there's another player on the field. Otherwise, there would have been no need for God to be born in human flesh in Jesus Christ. If there were no other player on the field, there would have been no reason for God to come in Jesus Christ and live among us as one of us. No reason for God to come in Jesus Christ to suffer and die and show us how to live as the beloved children of God that we are all called to be in our baptism. Well, I find it hugely comforting that the one who was God's beloved, the Son of God, fully human and fully God, that he was, as the book of Hebrews puts it, was tested as we are. Jesus was as vulnerable to temptation as we are. Therefore, he's able to sympathize with us in the complexities of the human experience. There are some Christians who think that the answer to everything that is wrong with human society and with us, broken mortals, is for us simply to get back to the Bible. Biblical morality, to use Scripture as a sort of playbook in which we are to run only the plays laid out for us in the Bible. But the only problem is that it's just not that simple. The devil is in the details. There is so much new to life and faith in the 21st century that couldn't even have been conceived of by the people in the 1st century or the 10th century before Christ. Peter Gomes of Harvard's Memorial Church writes that temptation masquerades most cleverly in the areas of moral ambiguity, where good people can be tempted to do either good things for the wrong reasons or bad things for a good and high purpose. Would that all you and I had to do was read the Bible and have everything be made clear. That might be the case were it not for our capacity for self-deception, were it not for the reality of human pride that blinds us to the most unspeakable of our sins. Almost always, it's in the name of virtue that vice is given its greatest aid and comfort. Goodness is no shield against temptation. Jesus had plenty of goodness. He was utterly committed to holding on to the good, and it was Jesus that Satan was most interested in. So whether you see Jesus' temptation in the wilderness as an actual geographical place or state of the soul, it's clear that it was the Spirit of God who led him into the wilderness. Clearly then, temptation, being put to the test, as difficult as it is part of the divine plan. How could Jesus help us be human in the way God intended if he were able to avoid the pain of being human? In the wilderness, Jesus met the devil head on. So, what about you? Do you believe in the devil? Well, if you are like the respondents of a recent Gallup poll of American Protestants, almost 3 out of 4 of you do believe in the devil. Just a little fewer than 1 out of 10 of you absolutely don't believe in the devil, and a little more than 1 out of 10 of you don't really have a good idea what you believe. In his great work, Church Dogmatics, the theologian Karl Barth warns against giving the devil more than his due. It's all right to look at the devil, to glance in that direction, but we must not linger and become engrossed with the subject. This matter may be real, but it must not be contemplated too long, says Barth. Many fundamentalist Christians give the devil probably more than his due, and many liberal Christians never give the devil a thought. Well, I'll tell you where I stand on the matter. Do I think that there is a little man with a goatee and horns and red suit and tail and pitchfork on the loose? Well, if that's what the devil is, then I'd have to say I believe in the devil only at Halloween. But I do believe that there is evil, radical evil in this world. There are forces both outside of myself and within my own soul that constantly battle to lead me and the whole creation away from life and life abundant that God promises in Jesus Christ. There are forces that try to pull you and me away from us achieving the fullness of what it means to be beloved, redeemed, accepted, the free children of God. And we know what those forces are. Anger, violence, drugs, addiction, greed, prejudice, bullying, indifference, just to name a few. Call him what you will. The devil, Satan, Beelzebub, the adversary, the father of lies, the tempter, appears more often in the New Testament than in the Old. In the book of Job, he walks around the earth spying on people and reporting back to God as to their conduct. Someone has suggested, in fact, that in the book of Job, Satan is more like the secret intelligence agents for God than anything else. But by the book of Chronicles, Satan has become identified as God's enemy in general, though he is infrequently mentioned in the Old Testament. It's in the Gospels that you and I see the devil show up regularly. There is a war going on between the forces of evil and the forces of God in Jesus Christ. Sometimes lurking in the shadows and sometimes boldly confrontational. Satan is a force to be reckoned with. Jesus had his first encounter with the devil immediately after his baptism. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the past 10 years or so in the Presbyterian Church, there has been a marked change in the way that we lead our baptismal service. When Catherine or I baptize a baby, we are now instructed by the church to ask this question of the adult or the child's parents who is to be baptized. The question is, trusting in God, do you turn away from sin? Do you renounce evil and its powers in the world? The idea is that if Jesus needed time to get clear about whose side he was on, surely those of us who would follow in his way are in similar need. And all we need to do is to look at that sweet little baby at the baptismal font and then turn on the TV to the evening news to understand the realm of God and the realm of the world. And they are in absolute conflict. Sometimes I think that the first order of business for those of us who would be Christ followers is to acknowledge the massiveness of our denial about the forces that work against the purposes of God. I don't believe that there is one separate being out there whose name is the devil, but I do believe that there are many evils, temptations, devils out there and in here, in my own heart, that must be reckoned with and acknowledged. So let me say a few more things about Satan. First, God and the devil are not and have never been equal adversaries. God made the world good and saw that it was good and declared that it will be good. But then came the scene that we read in the Old Testament for this morning. Adam and Eve and the serpent. Adam and Eve are not content to be human as God made them. They want to be more than human. They want to be without limits. They want to be like God. And then the snake comes. The serpent makes a lot of sense, doesn't he? Don't worry about eating the apple. It's not going to hurt you. This leads me to the second thing I want you to know about the devil. He almost always comes in a winsome, appealing, reasonable form. Think about it. Satan asked Jesus to do sensible things. Turn stones into bread when you're hungry. Jump off the steeple when you know you can't get hurt. Satan says, stop being so preoccupied with God. Please yourself. Satisfaction, fame, power, it can all be yours. It all makes a lot of sense until you stop to count the cost. And the cost, of course, is your soul. The cost is your very identity. And where did Satan come from? Where's the source of the power of darkness? There have been many debates in the church over the years and not much by way of answer. But one of the professors at my alma mater, Union Seminary in New York City, Walter Wink, suggests that you and I not focus on Satan as a fallen angel or even as a mysterious force that appears from hell. Walter Wink suggests that the spirit of negativity, which Satan represents, doesn't come so much from outside of you and me, but from inside of us, and from the systems and the structures that you and I build, and the choices that you and I make. Wink uses the example of a soccer match. When a riot breaks out at a soccer match and people trample one another to death, where does that come from? Has the riot demon leapt up from hell? Or are the bad choices and decisions being made that keep getting compounded and escalated? Think of those things that rip at the fabric of human society. Think of prejudice or anti-Semitism or uncontrolled greed or bullying. Where do they come from? Another realm? Absolutely not. These forces are forces of evil that are not visited upon us from the outside. They emerge from the brokenness that each of us carries within. And in your life and in mine, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could say, I don't know what got over me, the devil made me do it. I'm not responsible for the hurt I caused. Well, that's just utter nonsense. There is within us a God-given capacity for free will.